Hi there, I'm Judy Holland, and welcome to Happy Nest, the podcast where you can hear the latest research and best advice for living well when your kids leave home. Join me as I interview experts and explore how to reinvent yourself during this critical passage. I hope you'll head over to judyhollandauthor.com and check out my new book, Happy Nest: Finding Fulfillment When Your Kids Leave Home. Joining us today on the Happy Nest podcast is Terri Hanson Mead, an entrepreneur and helicopter pilot based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Terri is also author of Piloting Your Life: Take the Controls and Be the Pilot of Your Own Life. We're here on the Happiness Podcast today with Terri Hanson Mead. She's an entrepreneur, an angel investor, a startup advisor, expert witness, podcaster, and this I love, a helicopter pilot based in San Francisco in the Bay Area. Terri, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation with you.
So Terri, I'm somebody who's not comfortable with flying in small planes. So I would love, first of all, just for you to tell us a little bit about your piloting and why you do that and what that has to do with your new book.
It's actually a really great question. And just to let you know, I'm claustrophobic. So flying in small planes is also not a fun experience for me. As soon as I land on the ground, if I'm a passenger, the first thing I have to do is open the door a little bit because I start to panic. But I fly helicopters, and in helicopters, I have control. I'm the one who's in the pilot seat. And so my fear of heights, my claustrophobia seem to go away, strangely enough, when I'm flying helicopters. And the reason why I fly helicopters is when I was about 8 years old, my dad was a fixed wing pilot in Hayward, California, which is also here in the Bay Area. And I got to go up in a helicopter at an air show, and just said to myself one day, I want to fly one of these things. It was just one of those things that, it just strikes you, and it just hit me hard like a lightning bolt. And I never told anybody. When I was in college, I looked into becoming a helicopter pilot, and it was just too expensive and the timing wasn't right. But I told my husband when we moved down the peninsula to Silicon Valley, every time we would drive by the San Carlos airport, I saw all the helicopters and told my husband, one day I want to fly one of those. And for my 37th or 38th birthday, he gave me a discovery flight. And I'm pretty sure he regrets it because a year later I had my private rating, and about 5 years later I had my commercial rating.
Wow.
And flying is, when I am flying, it is because it's challenging and it's rewarding, and I can't focus on anything else or I'll die. And here in the San Francisco Bay Area, it's just gorgeous. There's just so much to see, and you fly helicopters to see things, not necessarily to go places. It just brings me alive. I absolutely love it.
Wow, no, that's great. Well, Terri, how did your flying, I know that this is a theme that runs through your book, Piloting Your Life: Take the Controls and Be the Pilot of Your Own Life. How did your love of flying helicopters morph toward a book, and then it became kind of a metaphor for your project?
Oh, it's a metaphor for my entire life. It really came from, it was kind of a branding thing, but it was really something that I was able to internalize and own. About 5 years ago, I got tired of some of the challenges I was facing with my consulting work within primarily biotech companies. I do IT strategy, IT compliance for life sciences companies. And there's very little appreciation for technology within biotech, med device, diagnostic, digital health. Hopefully with the pandemic, we'll start to see that change. But there's been a lot of resistance, and regulation contributes to that to some extent. And I was looking for, I was 45, I was looking for greater meaning, greater purpose. I didn't really realize what I was going through in terms of the menopause transition at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I became an angel investor and started investing in startups. And what I quickly realized, living in the Silicon Valley, this is a very bro-heavy, bro-centric environment. And being a woman over the age of 40, I was often dismissed as I walked into rooms. Yeah, it was incredibly frustrating. I was often thought of as the help or as admin or someone's wife, wasn't appreciated for who I was, and realized I was somewhat invisible. And I was also listening to a whole bunch of podcasts to learn as much as possible about startups and investing so that I could make smart investing decisions. And it really was the White Bro Show. And it was all the same people over and over again on all the different podcasts. And I thought, there's no diversity of voice, there's no diversity of thought, there's no diversity of perspective. And one of the things I realized as an investor in the groups and in the rooms, that I was always asking questions that were very different from all of the guys who looked the same and sounded the same. Mm-hmm. And I decided to launch a podcast. And when we were looking around for the theme and what I wanted to accomplish with it, I wanted to give a platform for people who didn't look and sound like everybody else, and share the stories of how people, regardless of where they came from, really were the pilots in their own lives. And that's how the whole theme of piloting your life came about, was with the podcast. And as I narrowed it down and focused more specifically on women, and then decided that I wanted to do a book, I narrowed it down to focus on women, midlife women, primarily Gen X midlife women. And the piloting your life theme, it just was a natural shift from the podcast to the book. And the piloting thing, being a woman, being a helicopter pilot, being a commercially rated helicopter pilot, this helps me stand out in a sea of men. So it's a bit of a branding thing, but it really is who I am. And I'm working on my next book, Piloting to Power. And it's just a step beyond for women to, piloting your life, I wrote to help women design and live a life of their own creation, specifically midlife women, but there are messages in it that are universal for all women. And then the next one, Piloting to Power, is a continuation of the piloting brand, but it's moving beyond just us, because once we realize who we are and what we want, let go of what no longer serves us, then we want to have greater impact. And so then it's a matter of how do we claim our power to change the world, both for ourselves and our broader community. And so that's what Piloting to Power is going to be about.
Wow, good. So you're using this downtime, this global pause to build for another project.
For me, it has, I mean, yes, it is a pause. It's a time to reflect. It's a time to, as I talk about in my YouTube videos on a regular basis, we have the opportunity right now to let go of what didn't work before and create something that works better for us. But I continue to consult. I continue to do the startup advising. We have, our house is full because our freshman in college, going to be a sophomore in the fall, he's been home. His girlfriend was living with us. It's a stressful time of uncertainty. So I think the timing is just right on the book. And I was jonesing kind of for a project. It would have happened, I think, regardless of what was going on in the world. The timing just seems even more appropriate now. But it's been a very busy, quote unquote, pause.
Right. No, I think it's a lot of us stay busy, but it's just a different beat out there, and perhaps just gives us more opportunity to reflect and make sure that we're not just caught up in busyness, but that we're directing ourselves toward genuine goals that will serve us and those around us.
Absolutely. I think just as, like I was talking about with life science companies and technology, my hope is that this would be a nice catalyst for those companies to really embrace technology, largely because they've been forced to. And like you're saying, I'm hoping specifically for, I want it to be for all people, but let's face it, I really care about midlife women, especially the lost Gen X generation, which right now is between, I think, 39 and 54. Mm-hmm. And I do hope that this gives an opportunity, especially with the added pressures of, aging parents, kids, shifting work, loss of work, fear about the future, that all of this, strips us down so that we can really take a look at what's most important in our life and focus on self-care, realizing that even though we were promised that we could have it all, do it all, and be it all, it was a false promise, because we weren't provided with the infrastructure and support in order for that to happen. So
Right.
all we did was have the added expectation that we could achieve more, but still having a foot in the old world of still having to do most of the caregiving, carrying the emotional load. And so I really do hope that, like you're saying, that this is an opportunity for people to, assuming they have the time to breathe. I mean, you have to be really intentional about it because there's just so much added pressure, especially on women right now,
Right.
that, taking the time to breathe and say, my life is important too.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, and I think that's a really good point that that applies to the baby boomer generation as well as the Gen Xers, and unfortunately, perhaps many women that come after that, like my
You're
daughters.
absolutely right. Yeah,
Right.
and I didn't mean to discount the other women.
Mm-hmm.
It's, as you probably learned and as we've all learned, if we target too broad of a group, we
Right.
miss completely. It was like
Right.
my first year of my podcast. And so it doesn't mean that I don't care. I care about all women, regardless. I care about women, people who identify as women. I want that definition to be as inclusive as possible. But if I'm going to try to help 65 million people, which is, I think there are 65 million Gen Xers in the world, then that's who I'm going to target.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's positive collateral damage that comes out of it, I'm happy with that too.
What are the messages our culture sends to middle-aged women, and why do you think those messages? How and why do you feel those messages seeping through?
That's that's such a hard thing. So the how and why really is misogyny. The bottom line, the messages that we get, and I do have to say that not all women feel this way, but I'm hoping that if you don't experience this, that you have empathy and compassion for other women who do. Because just because you don't experience it doesn't mean that other people don't. Basically, the messaging that we get is that we're disposable, we're no longer valuable, we're old hags, because we no longer necessarily look like the ideal, because we don't necessarily look as socially acceptable definition of sexy, that once again we're no longer of value. And we get that repeatedly through the media messaging, social media. I mean, it's even worse now with Instagram and other social media, and saying, 50 is the new 30. The messaging around that is you can't be who you are, that you need to strive to be something else. And I've succumbed to the whole Botox thing. I mean, I've got it in my head. I struggle on a daily basis with the idea that I'm rejecting the idea that my value that my whole worth and value is tied to my appearance. And I know that a lot of women struggle with that. But the barrage of messaging that we get, and the constant the micro cuts that we get on a regular basis, is that we've never been enough. And our experience and wisdom aren't valued as we, move into 40 and then move past 40. But it's largely misogyny.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how do we combat this as women? How can we make midlife a time of energy and renewal? A time to resolve childhood issues and come out stronger. How do we push that aside? Because I was a journalist on Capitol Hill for many years. I covered your lawmakers out there, Dianne Feinstein, Barbara Boxer for years, and I was very much always with 3 kids at home, surrounded by lots of men who had a lot more time and far fewer responsibilities than I did, and that kind of boils your blood and it breeds resentment, and it's everything from being pregnant and being at a press conference and feeling nauseated in your stomach and the baby's kicking you in the stomach. There's a lot of different things that go on, and have traditionally been many more balls to juggle. How do we come to terms with this? How do we fight back?
Therapy, lots of therapy. No, I'm just kidding. Although
Girlfriends, you're using.
therapy, therapy can be really, really helpful. A couple of things that I found in interviewing, the 35 diverse women from around the world, and then the extensive research that I did, and just what I've been trying to practice in my life. So the first thing is accepting where we are without judgment and trying to stop the comparison game. That's probably the first thing that we need to start with, is when we stop rebelling and rejecting the aging process, when we look at it as an opportunity to explore, to experiment. When I realized, when I did the math, I just turned 50. If I assume I'm going to live to be 100, I have 50 years left. And the first 50 have been great. I've been really blessed. It's been exciting and interesting, and I want more of that in the next 50. So seeing that as this wide open space is actually often terrifying for a lot of women, especially when we start losing the social constructs and the milestones, whether it's high school, college, first job, first car, first animal, dog, cat, iguana, whatever it is, whether you have kids or not, whether you decide to, have a spouse or significant other, and the milestones associated with that. And if you have kids, your kids' milestones, and you hit a certain point and there's just like wide open. And seeing that as a beautiful opportunity. So a lot of it is perspective. A lot of it is being very intentional, going, okay, this is scary, acknowledging the feelings, not letting those feelings just be without trying to change them. And then looking for ways to experiment, explore, find things that recharge your soul, and also working on taking a look at what no longer serves you. What rules are you following that are just constructs? I had to, and I continue to work on, and I challenge rules, and I'm like, well, why am I doing that? I was raised to, always follow through with something, or always read a book to the end. Why? Is it going to make me less of a person if I don't finish a book? No. Is it going to make me less of a person if I decide that the circumstances were such that I agreed to do something and it's changed and I no longer want to do it? No, this is where you communicate and you let people know. So it's an opportunity to it's silly, but in the book I talk about letting go of drag, and there are 3 chapters on letting go of drag. So letting go of the things that no longer serve you and being very intentional. And this is hard work. And so having self-care around this time is super important, being super kind with yourself. I know a lot of women, especially high achieving women, who are so hard. We are so hard on ourselves. We have such high expectations. We want it all. We want to be it all. And we kind of set ourselves up for unhappiness and failure when we don't treat ourselves with a bit of kindness and compassion, and allowing for failure. I talk in the book about failure should be your second favorite word. You can guess what my favorite word is. I'll try not to use it today, and we'll keep this G-rated usually. But, we also have to, like you're talking about the childhood issues, sometimes therapy is necessary. Sometimes talking about things with friends and not feeling like we have to be the blame for everything. I encourage the idea of something called crew chats in my book, where you get together with a couple of friends on a regular basis and you talk about things. And I put together ideas for crew chat conversations. It helps build your friendships, build your relationships, go deeper, but also realize that you're not the only one who's going through it or went through something. And it allows for, Brene Brown talks about shame can exist only with a couple of things, one of them being darkness. So if we bring visibility to it, we share it with trusted people, we can remove the things that we may be ashamed of from when we were younger. I talk about a couple of things in the book where I've had to look back and go, my goodness, you were 16 years old, cut yourself some slack, and allow ourselves to heal from some of those things, whether we brought them on ourselves or whether other people did them to us. And then at the same time, have compassion for that younger person. And then we also have the opportunity to grieve, and we need to allow ourselves to grieve for what was, what will never be, and there's a lot that we can acknowledge and say, okay, I'm going to grieve for a loss. Let's say you decided, this is probably going to trigger some people, but you decided not to have children, or you couldn't have children. And then at some point there's a lot of emotions tied in that. There's a lot of stuff tied into that. And to grieve for that, once, let's say you go through the menopause transition and you are no longer physically able to have them, and let's say you don't want to adopt and you've moved, there's all sorts of stuff around that. I probably should have chosen a better example, but allowing ourselves to acknowledge the feelings, grieve for what you thought was going to be that may not be, and be able to move on beyond that. And so when you talk about the time of renewal and resolving childhood issues, it's a huge thing, and it covers a lot of ground in terms of everything from letting go of shame, letting go of grief, letting go of rules that no longer serve you, looking for opportunities rather than seeing it's like, oh my God, my life is half over. It's like, yeah, my life is half over. Let's get moving. Let's get cracking on the things that I want in my life that I want to live.
So, meaning, you talked about feeling a new need for meaning or searching for more meaning as you got a little older. How did you switch gears to find meaning?
It was, how did I switch gears? I think it was just something that I wish I'd known that I was going through this process as I was going through it. I mean, this is a book that I want, everybody to hand to their turning 40-year-old friends so that they're not as blindsided by midlife as I was. It was just, I just started. I didn't realize until I was doing research for the book that the searching, the exploration, the feeling of unhappiness, that these were all normal parts of being in your 40s, especially for women. And like I said, when I was 45, and I was like, there's got to be something more. And I got into angel investing. And I talked to another buddy of the same guy who got me into angel investing. I was like, I want more. And he said, well, why don't you get into expert witness work? And so I just started asking questions, and I was blind. I was flailing about as I was searching for more. I didn't realize that this is fairly typical for men too. But as I said, my focus is on women in our 40s, especially when we hit a point where we start asking, is this all there is? Or there's an aging parent that brings about the idea of mortality. It brings us closer. Or our kids are aging and they don't need us in the same capacity. Or let's say we're in a corporate job and we realize we're not going to be able to climb. We're not going to be able to reach what we want. And so you get hit by all of these different, one or many of all of these different things to start looking for something more. And there are a lot of books out there. There's a great one, I think it's called Ikigai. I can provide you the link if you'd like. And there were other books about meaning and happiness that I read as part of the research. And for me, I was just flailing about. And then it wasn't until afterwards, it's like, oh, that's what I was doing. But a lot of women just say, I want to have greater meaning. I want to have greater impact in their lives. And so they just start searching. And a lot of times it's without the awareness that this is something that's very typical within midlife. But for me, it was, as I said, it was just flailing about, and it was just looking for new things and saying yes to opportunities. So when I had the opportunity to go to Necker Island to hang out with Richard Branson for a couple of days, I was like, oh my gosh. And I just took it. But it was part of my search for more, something better. And when I say more and better, it isn't like an accumulation of things. It was really just more and better for me in my life so that I could truly, I could be happier, more content, more satisfied, more feeling more gratified with my life. And as I said, it wasn't an accumulation of things. It really was a shift to experiences. And I'm a connector. So it was a matter of, if I lay these pebbles down or if I lay these steps down, eventually I'll find the thing that I want. And my hope with this book for women is that I provide some guidance and structure. I hate being told what to do, so there's nothing prescriptive in this book, but at least to go, this is why I'm here. Oh, this is why I'm asking these questions. This is why I'm rebelling against any sort of toxicity in my life, whether it's people, friends, family, workplace situations, injustices in the world. This is why I'm going through this, and this is why I'm looking for something that has greater meaning and greater purpose, and really gives me a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Mm-hmm. One of the books that I read, I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. We're gonna call this perimenopausal. brain real quick. But she said that there were, Barbara Bradley Haggerty said there are
Right,
three
right.
things that to set ourselves up
I know her,
for
yeah.
this her book. I think it's Life Reimagined.
It is.
It's
I have it right
amazing.
here, yeah.
It is amazing, but it's really, really intense. So if you, I included a lot of references in my book to it because it was so good. But she said to set ourselves up for a future, much better for a future later in life, we need three things. One is a reason to get out of bed, the meaning and purpose, or ikigai. The second thing is a little bit of exercise for our health. And the third is deep and meaningful relationships and friendships. And I always come back to those three things when I think about, having a healthy midlife and setting ourselves up for the future. But I'm glad you asked about the meaning and purpose because so many of us just flail around without understanding what we're looking for and why we're looking for it.
Right. No, and I think those relationships are so important. And I've seen in a lot of my research for my book, Happiness, Finding Fulfillment When Your Kids Leave Home, that many people prune friendships, cultivate new ones because we grow and we change through all these processes, and we need often something new. So I think we often lose patience for people and things that are toxic to us in midlife.
Absolutely. And I think we should. I think we women are socialized, well, at least in the US, because I'm finding that there are differences in other countries, but we're socialized to put other people first. We're socialized to be accommodating and pleasing and to not rock the boat and to not be difficult. And so we tend to be a lot more accommodating in our relationships than we should be. And one of the things that I found, and it was just, I didn't understand it until after I did the research, is that, a couple of years ago, it was like 4 years ago, I think I was 45 or 46. And I was like, I'm just done with some of these people. I'm not playing this game anymore. And while it was hard to cut those off because I'm a loyal person, I don't like giving up, and I felt like a bad person. It was like these are not healthy situations for me. And some were family, and some were friends, and it was hard, but it was so incredibly important because I had to make room for other goodness in my life. And so letting go of the things that were toxic or unhealthy for me. I mean, Lord knows I still have unhealthy habits, etc. I'm a total work in progress. But by letting go of makes room for other into our lives. And the other thing is sometimes it's hard to let go. I love the analogy. There's a swimming pool story. I think there's also the monkey with the rice story. They're fairly similar, but the what I like about the swimming pool, so we're hanging on to the side of a pool, and on our side is the stuff that really isn't serving us. But if we don't swim well and we need to get to the other side, on the other side we have to have something that is a good motivator to pull us over there, to help us get up our courage and be able to let go of something that may not be working for us. And so having something on the other side, so if you don't have something, it's hard to let go of what we have. But having something as a goal, or having something that's like, oh, I really want to be there, I want that in my life, it makes it a lot easier to let go of those things that are no longer making us happy and healthy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Terri, as we wrap up here, I wondered if you might just gather in your mind the top lessons that you've learned about thriving through midlife. And your earlier comment about putting yourself first, that's a really difficult thing for many women, and certainly with multiple kids and a job. My mother used to always say, take time for you, and I would just think, take time for you, I can barely get the gas in my car because I'm running from one thing to another. What are the top lessons that you've learned about thriving through midlife?
So, and to your point on that, we're also socialized to feel guilty about taking time for ourselves. So
Right.
we have that added burden on top of that. Well, I talked about what Barbara Bradley Haggerty talked about in terms of focusing on the relationships and a little bit of exercise, and then having meaning and purpose. I think that was the number one thing that I've learned through the research and then through the first 10 years of my midlife. Some
Mm-hmm.
of the biggest things for me, as I talked about, is with another 50 years left to live, I want to enjoy them, and I want to make it something that works for me. At the same time, embracing that I have responsibilities that I want. I'm not going to get rid of my husband, at least not this month. I'm not. My kids, I'm still sticking around with my kids, knowing that there are certain things that I don't have flexibility around. So I do acknowledge that as much as there are days that I just want to run away to the circus, I can't necessarily do that. I learned to trust myself and my intuition. I was raised very male oriented, and very analytical in my brain. And over the last couple of years, I've realized how powerful and valuable a woman's intuition is. I mean, this is such a gift that we have. And I've learned to embrace it and not see it as something that was mamby-pamby and weak and too womanly. So I've also learned to embrace my being a woman. And femininity is not a bad thing. And we bring a lot to the world that the world is seriously lacking right now. So trusting myself, intuition, that it's okay to be a woman. It's also okay to change my mind. And that's been a super powerful thing, so that I don't follow through with commitments that are really not necessary, and no one's really going to care anyway. And if they do care, hopefully they'll be compassionate about it. Saying no, I've learned the importance of saying no so that I can say yes to things that I want in my life. And that's a hard one, because we're socialized to be the people pleasers and to not let other people down and not to disappoint them. And I just had to let go of what other people think and feel. I can respect their feelings without making them the priority in it. Two more things. The world was not designed by or for women, and I want to change that. That's part of the reason why I'm doing Piloting to Power, is I want us to be able to claim who we are as women so that we can change the world, to make it so that, seatbelts work for people with boobs, and we have a place to put a purse in the car, and that, we won't die in a car accident because they're testing with male size dummies and not, women. Or, there's just so many things. There's a book called Invisible Women. It has so many examples of how the world was not designed by and for us. And then finally, the importance of designing and living a life of my own creation, and that I can put myself first without feeling guilty, and the world will be a better place for it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, that's quite a synopsis, and I think those are all very wise ideas. Thank you, Terri, very much for giving us time, and I really appreciate your thoughts, and good luck on your next project.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate that the work that you are doing, because having kids is hard.
It's complicated, right? And launching things, and we have kind of an entrepreneurial vein in common, and that's a good force for reinvention and creativity as we move forward in these uncertain times.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning into my Happiness podcast, where we explore how to get the best out of the empty nest. I hope you'll subscribe, write a review, and reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Check out my website, judyhollandauthor.com. Have a great day, and remember, make it happen.